Hi there. This is a quick how-to video for how you're going to be able to get the most value out of the short-term kind of Airbnb or VRBO rental model. This is for the single unit, so this assumes you kind of have one rental and goes into really, really good detail on how you can get the most value out of it and how it's built so that you aren't wasting any of your time. As soon as you buy it, you can use it to its full advantage. So starting off, there is a dashboard here. This is going to be really useful for visualizing kind of the future and your future cash flows, your future expenses. You can kind of tweak a lot of parameters within this model and kind of visualize it here. Helpful for sharing ideas with investors or partners, and just having a high-level view of everything. So we've got 4 charts out of the box. If you want additional charts, just let us know. Just reach out to us on support, and we can likely just add those in for you, because no two investor works exactly the same. Some people want to see different things. But this has the revenue, cash flow, weighted occupancy over the next 5 years. And you can see here, the cash flow starts negative because there was some upfront costs that went into renovating the space. And then, after the first few years, you're breaking even. And then if you continued on, you'd have much more positive cash flow. Then we just have a breakdown of your expenses. So once you enter all of your expenses, you're going to have a breakdown here. So you can see like 33% of it's going to be your rent or mortgage payment, depending on whether you're doing arbitrage or if you own the building outright with a mortgage. Property management fees, things like that. So kind of keeping an eye on what's the bulk of your expenses coming from. It's a nice, easy visual to use. Then we're tracking the cash on cash return. This is just one metric. Of course, it's skewed for year one because of the initial outlay of cash. But then you can see the cash on cash return in this model for right now, with all the different variables that it has, is increasing dramatically after the first year, right? And then we're taking a look at the cash balance at the end of every year that you have. So again, this is kind of like your break even. So this would be where you might say, hey, I need to borrow $35,000 up front, or things like that, right? And after 4 years, from a cash flow perspective, you'll have made your investment, right? So these are all very, I think, useful. You'll get a lot of value out of them. And that's kind of the overview. So as you change all your different inputs in this model, it's going to reflect in the dashboard and, everywhere else. So it's completely automated in that way. So this next tab is the inputs and assumptions tab. This is really where you're going to make this model your own. You're going to be able to input all of your rental rates. We do have a weekday and a weekend rental rates because I know a lot of, you'll do some surge charging based on demand. So if your weekends have a lot more demand, you can obviously charge a better price. Everything in blue, that's shaded in blue, means you have the ability to change these numbers based on what your specific strategy is, right? Or your costs are. So I'll just go really quickly down the line here. So you can plug in a percent for the increase in your rental rates. It's probably a good idea to bake this in based on inflation and things like that. And then, of course, you have your cleaning fees. So however you do them, feel free to put your amount in here. So we do it on a per stay basis, and there's a couple of other inputs that are on per stay basis as well. This is just do you have an increase in your cleaning fees every year, roughly at 7 or 8%, kind of in line with whatever your rental rate increase probably makes sense. But feel free to tweak that number. Occupancy is super important. It really drives how this model works and how you're going to make money. So if your weekday occupancy is 50%, you can put 50 here. Obviously, it would be ideal to be 100%. That's usually not likely, but if you are in that shape, then great. Put 100 in there. You'll obviously get the most kind of value out of that you can. And then again, if you're kind of optimizing and getting better over time, you may want to forecast an increase in your occupancy rates so you have good reviews coming in over time and more people are demanding the space, etc. That's all going to flow through the model. And then super simple here, just put in your monthly expenses so that they kind of flow through. You may have more, feel free to add them, but usually this kind of plug number here in other costs is where you would put stuff that doesn't fall under any of these other categories. If you do need a tweak, like I said, just reach out to our support team. We can probably hop on a really quick call and make a very quick adjustment for you if you need to add a few costs. But usually if you have a few extra costs, just put them in other costs, and that will kind of cover your miscellaneous expenses. Inflation rate for expenses. So essentially, if your costs are going to increase over time, which they likely are, you can put this percent in here, and every year the model will know to increase your cost as well. And then we have hosting fees. I don't know if you might have a different platform if you don't use Airbnb. So you may not have hosting fees, or you may have a different one. This is just to make sure you're accounting for those costs as you book stays. And then taxes as a percent of revenue. 10% is a fine number, but feel free to use whatever you know to be true for your specific example. Also really important here, if you have upfront cash in the strategy that you're doing, so let's say you're renovating or you're buying the property through financing, you'll probably have a down payment and things like that. You want to account for them here. That way, the cash balance in the model works correctly. And you'll kind of see what I mean in a second, but just put in, and you might have to estimate if you haven't pulled the trigger on your strategy yet, but this will help you plan out different scenarios. And then we have per stay assumptions here. So this is pretty important. How many days on average do customers stay? Because that's going to affect how many stays you have within a month and different things like that. So the model is going to take this number into account as well. Cleaning costs per stay. So, we talked about the cleaning fee per stay. Assuming that you're making money, this number should be higher than the cost. And then you'll have supplies, toilet paper, maybe snacks, things like that. Those can go in here per stay. This number looks kind of low, but feel free to adjust this number based on what your averages are. Property assumptions. That if you're financing it, you're going to have that monthly financing payment, your principal and interest payments, things like that. Just put those in here. This is pretty self-explanatory. If you're renting it, like running arbitrage, similar concept. Just put the dollar amount in here. You're probably going to pay an increase in rent every year, so feel free to put that number in there as well. And then if you're managing property yourself, you probably don't have an expense. If you're having an external party do it, you'll put those costs in here. And that's pretty much it. So it gives you a lot of flexibility here, and I highly recommend playing with these numbers and seeing what's going to work best for you and what's best for your specific scenario. Again, this tool is really powerful because it helps you look at different scenarios 5 years down the road without having to, it basically lets you see into the future, right, based on what decisions you're going to make today. So the calculations tab, I would not, this is where all the math happens based on a lot of your inputs in this section. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here because we roll it up in a much easier way to look at everything. So, I mean, this is a big wall of numbers. This is all the math that goes on, kind of where the magic happens, things like that. But if you do want to dive into it, feel free to kind of figure out what's happening here. But this is where all the math happens and how the model kind of forecasts out in the future. Then we have a nice kind of P&L for you, pro forma. This is something that you can share with investors. It's a very simplified sort of profit and loss statement. So you'll have your revenues, you'll have your expenses. If you had any startup costs, which could be like closing costs and things like that, those will go in here. This is a really nice, concise financial summary. One of the cleanest that I've seen. So very useful in sharing with bankers or investors or things like that. And then I think another kind of trick would be if you want to compare this model as you change assumptions, you can always kind of take a snapshot of this and copy it or a snapshot of the P&L and copy it, and then change assumptions, and you might have 3 or 4 different versions of it, and you can see which one you like best. So I hope that makes sense. That's just a good kind of in-depth walkthrough. If you have, of course, any specific questions, we're here kind of 24/7 to help you out. And then there's also, you may have some slight tweaks that you want to make or customizations. We do that as well. We understand that, we want you to get the most value you can out of this. So absolutely reach out to us, and we can make some changes for you. Thank you.